In this video, I have some advanced tips, techniques, and examples for your star and F2L. So the first and most important thing to improve your star solving and as you get faster is to know your color order back to front. And this means not only knowing things like the red center is to the left of the blue center, but also things like the green center is 2 places to the left of the blue center. So you should really know your color order back to front and know about all the relative positions of these 5 colors around your F2L color. One important thing that you can do with a strong understanding of your color order is to solve offset stars. So this is just like solving offset crosses on the 3x3 whereby we place all the edges into the top layer correctly relative to one another and then do an alignment of the top layer to completely solve our cross or star. Solving offset stars is useful on the Megaminx, but it can be somewhat risky if you don't know your color order back to front. In my opinion, trying to plan an entire star on your Megaminx and solve it blindfolded is probably not the most realistic goal for everyone, and personally I don't do it. I generally try and plan 3 or 4 of my Megaminx star edges and then have an idea of where the last one will end up or something like that. It really depends on the scramble. Another thing is that you should try and deal with kind of trickier edges first. So let's say we've got this, white and yellow one here and the white and blue one here. These can both be easily inserted with just RF, like that, to solve these two. But that leaves this white and purple one down here. So there's a pretty easy way to insert this white and purple one back here before solving these two, which would just be something like F prime RF, U prime, and then solve these last two. So the main tip there is if we can figure out nice ways to solve star edges which are in undesirable positions without affecting the edges which are in good positions, then we should definitely do that. Another thing to keep in mind when solving your star and also your F2L is to take advantage of already solved F2L pairs as you're doing your star. So let's say, we've solved these 3 and we go over to this position to continue solving this white and red one and this white and green one, and we see something like this where we have this F2L pair already paired up, and if we went to insert this white and green one over to this position, then we would most likely have to break this up, whereas if we're in this position, we can just do U, R2 prime, U2 prime, R2 to insert that pair very quickly and also keep track of this white and dark green and white and red one, so then we can go ahead and solve those immediately afterwards. I would also recommend trying this out for cases which aren't just a 3-move insertion. So let's say, we're in this position and we've solved our first 2 star edges like that, and we get this case here which has white and dark blue and the yellow and dark blue and the white, yellow and dark blue corner here. And we don't need to rotate at all to solve this pair. And if we were to, go over and solve this white and dark green and the white and red, that would most likely, move this corner away from this area. So what it's best to do here is genuinely just to solve that F2L pair, keep track of this white and dark green one, and then go on and solve the rest of the star. So doing partial crosses like this or partial extended crosses are fine, and it's generally not too hard to just go ahead and insert a cross piece later. And if the F2L pairs show up quite nicely like they did in those examples, then this can be a very, very useful tactic. As always, it is important to stay practical about these sorts of things and not to overdo it and make it too complicated for yourself. So in a case like this where we've got the white and dark green and the white and red here, which are a pretty easy insertion, but we see this pair, it makes more sense to just go ahead and solve these last 2 star pieces so that we can be happy and finish our star rather than, moving this one all the way over to this F2L slot. So, as we're completing our star, we can preserve it and move it out of the way and then go ahead and solve it rather than, doing all the rotations to go and solve it and then coming back and finishing off our star, because rotations are also something that it's not very good to do during your star and F2L. So as I've just mentioned, rotations on the Megaminx are a little bit awkward, and it's generally a good idea to avoid them or minimize them. And it's not always the case that, the move efficient solution for an F2L pair is going to be the speed optimal solution. So here's just an example of kind of what I mean by minimizing rotations and, turning quickly. So I've got this corner and this edge, which belong in this slot back here. And there's there are so many different ways, because we have so much freedom and flexibility. There are so many different ways in which we can pair these up and insert them. And one way, which only uses one rotation, and it's just like a Z prime rotation kind of, is to do something like U, R, U, R, U, rotate this way, and then do R2 prime, U2 prime, R2. Whereas kind of the move efficient thing might be to do something like U prime, F2, R prime, and then move over here and then insert it. So as you can see, that uses less moves, but it's probably slower because you're turning more layers and you're doing more rotations of the puzzle. As I've shown you in the intermediate tutorials, there are many shortcuts for inserting F2L pairs without doing rotations. So let's say we've got this pair down here, and we need to bring it into this slot. We can literally just do it in 3 moves by doing U2, R2, U2 prime, like that, which solves this pair from down here into this slot in the back left position over there. Another really simple example, and these are just examples, there's so many more ways, and these can be found through discovery and experimentation and slow solving and that sort of thing. So another quite easy case is where we have these two over here, and they need to go into this slot, and we have this slot empty. So we can do something like F2 prime, R prime, F2, R, like that, rather than kind of the default solution, which would be to rotate, move it up to this position, and then rotate again and insert it. Just for fun, here's one more example of a rotationless solution. So we've got these two, this is the white, dark blue, and red, and this piece here, and they belong in the back right slot. So we can just do something like R prime, U2 prime, R prime, U prime, R2, like that, to insert them in the back slot. Another very useful tactic to avoid rotations is to be able to solve F2L pairs whilst holding a star on the left-hand side of the cube. So let's say we have these two pieces, like this, and we're somehow in an orientation where our grip is like this. Instead of, rotating and then pairing these up like so, we can do something just like R2, U prime, R prime, U. So U prime, R prime, U pairs these two up and puts them into this slot, and that saves a rotation. Of course, it goes without saying, but look ahead is by far the most important thing during your F2L, far more so than on the 3x3 cube, simply because there are so many layers and positions where pieces can be. The first thing is, of course, using techniques such as tracking pieces whilst you're solving F2L pairs, and in order to help you look ahead for the next pair. But another thing is to just try and remember kind of the general location of where pieces are, and remembering and taking mental notes during solving your F2L is important because you often lose visibility of certain pieces around the puzzle. So I've just got a random case to demonstrate this. So let's start out. I've got these two pieces which can be solved with just R, U, R prime. And the important thing to note here is that when I did this R, U, R prime, this corner piece kind of came out of this slot and it belongs in this slot. So what I'm going to do is just kind of put it down here with an L move to save it for later. And then I'll go ahead, because I noticed that I've got this edge piece and this corner piece. So what I'm going to do is solve those. And as I'm solving those, I also notice that the edge piece, which belongs with this corner piece, is back here. So as I'm solving those, because the corner has kind of temporarily disappeared, so it's no longer visible, I'm actually just looking around to find its corresponding edge piece, because I've remembered that I've put this corner down here. So I'm subconsciously looking for the dark green and red edge piece. So whilst I'm doing this pair, which should be a subconscious action just to pair it up and insert it, I am looking around the immediate vicinity to see if I can find, and I can, this dark green and red edge. So once I do that, I go back here and go ahead and solve this dark green and red edge. And what I can do is an F2, R, U, R prime, U prime, R, to solve it into the back slot. So now I've got these last two slots empty to solve here in the front. And fortunately enough, these two and these two are all I can solve both of these pairs actually from this orientation. So I can do something like R, U2, R prime, U, R, U, R prime. And probably what I'll do is rotate like this to do R, U, R2 prime, U prime, R to finish off the F2L there. Another tip for look ahead is that if you're solving an F2L pair and you're in a position where you really don't see any other of your F2L pieces, what you should do is, whilst you're solving this pair, immediately kind of prepare yourself to do a rotation to another place on the puzzle, whereby there will be more pieces, simply because, in this situation, we've only solved one F2L pair, and I don't see any of my F2L pieces in this vicinity apart from these two. So what I'm going to do is pair them up, insert them, and then because I see literally nothing here, I'll just immediately rotate over to this position, and I see some F2L pairs popping up. So these two, and these two. So I'll go ahead, solve those and then finish off the F2L. My last tip for this video is to try and avoid finishing your F2L in an area too far away from your first S2L color. So let's say you use the Westland method for solving S2L, or a similar variation. Essentially, if you do have a fixed color for your second color after the F2L, then, for me it's yellow. If I'm finishing my red and dark green pair over here as my last F2L pair, then I need to go all the way over here and then start on my yellow, which costs a little bit of time. So it's about kind of making the decision as to which F2L pair to solve next. And here's, I guess, a nice example. So I've got these two and these two, and this F2L pair has yellow in it. So I'm going to save it for last so that I can insert it and then go and start my yellow star in F2L. So I'm going to do these two first. Into this slot here, and then I'm going to go ahead and solve these two. So these two yellow ones into this slot. So then that way I'll be far closer to the yellow side to start doing my yellow star and F2L, because it'll just be one rotation away like that.